Hey, you! Yes, you! The one still awake, still negotiating with tomorrow like tomorrow has ever been flexible. Welcome back to a small, quiet space where nobody asks you to be impressive, productive, or even particularly coherent. Tonight is for lowering the volume. Tonight is for letting the day slide off you like a heavy coat you forgot you were wearing. Bring your mind into the present because it behaves better there. You sit by cooling fountains in a Persian garden. Water threads through stone channels with patient certainty. Cypress trees stand tall and dark, their shadows long and steady. The air carries a faint sweetness, rose, leaf, and something clean and mineral like cool stone after rain. The last light softens everything it touches, as if even evening is trying to help. And here's your cheeky reality check. You probably won't survive this version of bedtime. Not because anything scary happens, because it doesn't, but because the part of you that thrives on tension, scrolling, and quiet panic, that part is going to get bored and wander off. Good riddance! So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights, take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You are at the garden's threshold, and the world outside already seems hotter, louder, and slightly rude. The entrance is simple, yet the moment you step through, your body understands it has crossed into a different set of rules. The first rule is shade. It meets you immediately, cool and deliberate. Your shoulders stop bracing. Your breathing drops lower, like it remembers where it belongs. The second rule is water. You hear it before you fully see it. A low, continuous song that never needs applause. It spills into a basin with a small, bright splash, then slips onward through a narrow channel that keeps it moving, keeps it useful. You walk slowly because the place rewards slowness. Everything here feels arranged for calm. Straight tree trunks, trimmed borders, open space for the sky. Even your thoughts quiet down as if they don't want to ruin the atmosphere. The fountains draw you toward the center. Water rises and falls in gentle patterns, never rushing, never hesitating. Each drop lands, each ripple widens, then dissolves into the next. You sit on the edge of a stone basin and feel the coolness seep through cloth into your legs. It's the kind of cold that doesn't punish, it steadies. Your hands rest on your knees, and for once, they don't reach for anything. A lantern glows somewhere deeper in the garden, small, warm, contained, making the shadows softer instead of scary. The water catches that glow and breaks it into trembling fragments, as if the garden is practicing gentleness in every direction. You let your gaze drift along one of the channels. It runs straight, then disappears behind a low wall, continuing its work where you can't see. That feels like a lesson delivered without drama, The most essential things often happen out of sight. The garden does not brag about its systems. It simply functions, and because it functions, you can rest. Not far away, you notice quiet movement, caretakers passing between shadow and lamplight, pausing near a channel, checking the flow, then moving on. No one rushes. No one performs busyness to prove worth. It's almost shocking how calm looks when it's allowed to be normal. You listen longer. The fountain's sound becomes a soft metronome. Your thoughts, which came in loud and crowded, begin to separate, then soften. The day's sharp edges, messages, deadlines, small disappointments you replayed too many times still exist, but they stop poking you. They float for a moment, then sink, like leaves settling on water. You lean back slightly and look up. Between the tall cypress tips, the sky deepens into a clean, dark blue. A first star appears, faint and stubborn, and your chest loosens as if it recognizes an old truth. The night can hold you without requiring anything. For now, you do not need to move. You sit by cooling fountains in a Persian garden, letting shade and water do what they were built to do. You feel yourself becoming heavier in the best way, anchored, safe, unperformed. Your eyelids grow warm, and the world narrows to the hush of water and the cool touch of stone, and you allow the first real surrender of the night. You stay seated long enough for your body to stop arguing with the idea of rest. The fountain keeps its steady work, dropping water into water, as if repetition is not a prison, but a kindness. When you finally rise, you do it slowly, because the garden has trained you for it already. Here, quick movements feel out of place, like shouting in a library. You follow a walkway laid with pale stone. It doesn't curve randomly. It runs with intention, straight as a quiet promise, guiding your eyes and feet toward a point that seems to pull you forward. On either side, low borders hold flowering plants in neat discipline. Beyond them, darker shapes, shrubs, small trees, create layers of shadow that make the space feel deeper than it is. The geometry is not cold, it is comforting. In the outside world, chaos loves to sit on your chest and call it normal. In here, order becomes a lullaby. Your mind, always eager to list problems, begins to sort itself without effort, as if symmetry gives it permission to be less dramatic. You reach a crossing where two paths meet, forming a clean, balanced intersection. A narrow channel runs beside you, carrying water in a thin, shining ribbon. You step over it at a small stone bridge, and the sound changes, slightly higher, slightly brighter, because the water passes over a different surface. Even the noises here have structure. You move deeper, and the garden begins to reveal its quiet tricks. Sightlines open and close. You look down one path and see a fountain framed perfectly by cypress trunks, like a picture placed there on purpose. You look down another and find a pool reflecting the sky, so still it looks like the world has been pressed flat. Each turn feels designed to reset you. New angle, new breath, new softness. The cypress trees are everywhere, tall and narrow, holding their shape with calm certainty. They make the air feel cooler, and they also do something to your thoughts. They stand like punctuation marks, reminding you to pause. Their dark green is steady, unshowy. They do not try to be charming. They simply exist, and that makes them strangely soothing. You pass an orchard corner where small fruit trees sit in tidy rows. Leaves rustle faintly in the evening wind. The scent shifts. Less rose now, more green and faintly citrus, with a dry note of soil that has been watered and then allowed to breathe. You inhale, and it feels like inhaling a clean page. A few locals move along a parallel path, unhurried. Their clothing catches the last light. Deep tones, warm tones, colors that look like they belong to earth and spice rather than plastic. They do not stare at you. They do not ignore you either. Their attention is the kind that registers you as a human in the space and then lets you be. You find yourself relaxing into that because you're so used to being either watched or invisible. As you walk, you begin to notice small markers of care. The edges of the paths are swept clean. Fallen petals are gathered and placed into a woven basket near a wall, ready to be carried away. A low stone lip keeps the water in its channel and prevents it from wandering. Everything is gently contained. Nothing is wasted. You stop at another viewpoint where the garden's main axis stretches ahead. In the distance, a larger pool holds the reflection of the sky's deepening blue. A faint breeze moves across its surface, wrinkling the reflection like fabric. You think about how often you try to hold your life perfectly still, how you tense up when something ripples the surface. The garden does not tense. It allows movement and stays itself. You take a handrail of carved stone for a moment, feeling its coolness. The surface is worn smooth in places, shaped by countless hands over time. That wear is not damage, it is proof. Proof that people have leaned here, paused here, breathed here, survived here. You are not the first person to come carrying an overfull mind. You will not be the last. The path leads you to a small alcove where the walls rise slightly, offering privacy without trapping you. The channel of water runs through it, and the sound becomes more intimate, like the garden is speaking close to your ear. You sit again, not because you are tired, but because your mind understands that sitting is part of the design. From here, you can see how the garden holds opposites in balance: open sky and shaded corners, straight lines and soft leaves, still pools and moving channels. It is like watching someone who knows how to live, how to make space for beauty without pretending problems don't exist. You feel the outside world tug at you, faintly, like a distant radio, but the tug weakens as you listen to water and watch light fade. You remember how your day felt earlier, too fast, too loud, too full of things that demanded your reaction. Here, the garden demands nothing. It offers. It arranges calm like a gift placed neatly in your hands. You rise once more and continue along the axis, letting the geometry guide you. Your footsteps match the slow rhythm of the fountains. Your breathing matches the coolness of the shade. And without making a big announcement about it, you begin to move through the world the way the garden moves water, steady, deliberate, always returning to balance. You keep moving, but the garden keeps editing you, snipping away the unnecessary tension, trimming your thoughts back to something tidy. The main path eases you toward a cluster of stone basins, each one catching the last light as if the sky has agreed to linger. Here, the air changes. It becomes softer, sweeter, faintly damp. Rosewater hangs in it like a polite memory, not the loud, syrupy kind that tries to impress strangers, but a quiet floral hush mixed with cool mineral stone and leaf green shade. You inhale and feel your shoulders drop another millimeter, which is a minor miracle considering how much your body loves bracing for absolutely nothing. The basins sit at different heights, arranged so water can step down from one to the next without fuss. Their rims are smooth, worn by time and touch. When your fingers find the edge, the stone is cool and slightly grainy, like it remembers every season it has outlasted. Tiny beads of water cling there, catching lamplight, trembling, then sliding away in slow arcs. Nothing rushes to finish. Everything simply continues. You settle near a wide, shallow basin where a small spout breaks the surface with steady patience. Water rises, falls, and spreads into rings that soften into one another. Your mind, always eager to grab a problem and chew it for sport, finds the pattern soothing. You watch a ripple widen, fade, disappear, and you realize your thoughts could do that too if you stopped gripping them like they're your only hobby. Blossom beds border the space with muted color, pale pinks, whites, deeper reds tucked under dark leaves. A few petals have drifted into the rill, floating like tiny boats that refuse to be productive. The breeze moves through the roses, and they sway, slow and sleepy, as if the whole garden is exhaling. A caretaker passes carrying a woven basket of fallen petals and leaves. Nothing dramatic, just the daily leftovers of beauty. A damp cloth is folded in their hand. They pause at a basin, wipe dust from stone, check the flow with a glance, then move on. Their pace is unhurried, but purposeful. No performance. No frantic, "Look how busy I am." Just quiet maintenance, done the way you do something when you respect it. You notice how their steps avoid the narrow channels, how their movements never interrupt the water's line. Water is not a prop here. It is the garden's spine, the reason shade feels gentle instead of stale. You think about your own spine, sleep, meals, silence, the basics, and how often you treat those like optional accessories, then act shocked when you wobble. Near the roses, a small stone bowl sits half hidden by leaves, filled with water that holds a few petals. They rotate slowly, turning with the faintest current. It looks effortless, and your brain tries to turn it into a lesson. Fine. The garden can handle your metaphors. The petals don't resist the movement, they let the water carry them, and somehow that feels like permission. You start noticing textures the way you notice worries, except these don't bite. The path stones are warm where they still hold the day, cool where shade has claimed them. The basin rim chills your fingertips enough to wake your senses. Leaves are waxy, edges crisp, veins firm. A thin film of moisture rests on certain surfaces, quiet proof that water has passed here recently. Everything is tactile, real, and grounding in a world that often feels like glowing glass and invisible deadlines. Other locals drift through with small things in hand, a clay pitcher, a bundle of trimmed branches, a shallow tray. They pause to straighten a border stone, lift a fallen twig from the path, brush soil back into place. Nothing heroic, nothing rushed. It's the calm discipline of doing small tasks before they become big problems. An idea so simple you almost want to argue with it, purely out of habit. You lean closer to the basin. The sound here is intimate, less splash, more murmur. Water slips over a lip, threads through a narrow notch, gathers again. That gathering feels important. Your day has been nothing but scattering, messages, errands, tiny alarms going off in your head. This basin collects water, holds it briefly, then releases it onward, as if reminding you that holding is not the same as hoarding. A soft wind carries rose scent across the surface. For a moment, it's strong enough that you taste it, floral, clean, cooling at the back of your tongue. You close your eyes and imagine the air rinsing you. Dust of the day, sharpness of thought, stale heat of stress. When you open your eyes again, the water is still moving, still patient, still doing its quiet work. You stay until the sky deepens and lanterns glow brighter by comparison. The locals continue their unhurried circuits around the basins, and you realize you've stopped feeling like an intruder. You are simply another quiet body beside the water, another listener in the shade, learning, slowly, stubbornly, how to soften without falling apart. You drift onward, and the garden keeps offering you small doors into its routine. Not literal doors, though there are some of those too, tucked into walls like secrets, but openings in the day-to-day life that runs underneath the beauty. You begin to notice patterns that aren't just visual, they're behavioral. The place has rules, and they are enforced by hands, not signs. Near a low wall, you see the caretakers again. There are more of them here, moving in a loose rhythm that feels practiced. One carries a long-handled broom made of stiff reeds. Another has a small wooden measure. A third holds a clay jar, its rim darkened with moisture. Their work is quiet. Their faces are calm. Their attention is sharp, but it does not tense into anxiety. They start with the path. The sweeping dust settles into soft lines, gathering grit and fallen petals with a patience that makes you feel slightly ashamed of how you clean by panic wiping a table while thinking about 5 other things. The sweeping doesn't just remove dirt, it restores the path's clarity, the crisp edge that makes the garden's geometry feel trustworthy. Then they move to the water. One kneels near the channel, leaning close enough to listen. The water's sound changes when it meets a pebble, when a leaf partially blocks the flow, when the surface turns rough. You wouldn't notice unless you cared, and clearly caring is the whole job. A small metal hook appears, simple, utilitarian, and with it they lift a twig from the channel. They remove a clump of silt with a cloth, gently, without splashing. The water is treated like something with dignity. That is a detail you didn't know you needed. You stand back, giving space, but your curiosity keeps you anchored nearby. The caretaker with the wooden measure dips it into a basin, checking the level. Their hand is steady. They look up at the surrounding beds, then back down at the water, as if reading a relationship between leaf and flow, between thirst and supply. You realize this is not just gardening. It's management of balance. It's understanding what the plants take, what the sun steals, what the wind dries, and what must be returned. They move toward a row of young trees and pour water at the base with a controlled tilt, letting it sink into soil rather than spread uselessly. The pour is slow, deliberate, almost tender. Water is precious enough to be respected, but not so precious that it becomes a source of panic. The garden doesn't treat scarcity with drama. It treats it with discipline. You follow their path with your eyes, and you begin to piece together their routine. Early morning would be the first check. Channels cleared, levels measured, basins refreshed. Midday would require protection, shade where possible, careful watering where needed, watching for wilting leaves like watching for a fever. Evening would be a reset, sweeping paths, pruning damaged branches, collecting fallen blooms, making sure the garden is ready to hold the night. One caretaker pauses near a rose bush and pinches away a spent flower head, then another. The movement is quick, practiced, not cruel, not careless. It's the kind of removal that allows new growth. You think of your own life, things you keep out of guilt, habits you keep out of familiarity, worries you keep because you've mistaken them for responsibility. The gardener's hand does not hesitate. It removes what is done. A small pruning knife flashes briefly in the lantern light, then disappears back into a cloth wrap. A thin branch falls into the woven basket. Leaves and petals collect there like the garden's discarded thoughts. The basket grows heavier, but it is not a burden. It is simply a container for what has finished its job. You walk closer to a stone ledge where tools are arranged. Nothing is scattered. A cloth rests folded. A jar sits capped. The hook is laid down in the same place it was picked up. You sense an ethic. Order is not aesthetic here. It is practical. In a place where water is life, you do not waste time hunting for a tool. You hover near a channel and watch the water slide past, smooth and narrow, reflecting a sliver of sky. The caretaker with the reed broom sweeps again, and dust lifts in a soft cloud before settling. The air smells faintly of earth and crushed leaf. It's clean without being sterile. The caretakers move around you without making you feel watched. They do not need your approval. They do not need to explain themselves. Their confidence comes from repetition and results. The garden is proof. It exists because they show up every day and do what needs doing, whether anyone is there to admire it or not. That is when something clicks in you, quietly, like a latch sliding into place. The garden's peace is not accidental. It is maintained. It is chosen again and again by people who understand that beauty doesn't survive on hope alone. You stand there in the cool evening, listening to the water, watching hands at work, and you feel a strange relief. Calm is not a personality trait you're born with. It is a practice. It can be built, measured, cleared, restored, one small, steady action at a time. You keep close to the rhythm of their work, and the garden keeps leading you into softer corners, as if it senses you finally stopped fighting the point. Past the stone ledge of tools, the path narrows slightly and slips into deeper shade. The air cools. The lantern light becomes warmer by contrast, turning leaves into layered silhouettes. Ahead, you notice a resting area tucked beneath a canopy of vines. It is not hidden so much as gently protected, framed by low walls and climbing greenery. A small platform of stone sits just above the water channel, and woven mats lie neatly on its surface. The space has that quiet look of a place where people regularly pause, like a bench worn smooth, like a room that has learned the shape of human tiredness. A caretaker approaches with a shallow tray. On it, a small glass of tea, pale amber, steaming faintly in the evening air. A few pieces of fruit, pomegranate seeds glistening like tiny rubies, a slice of something citrus bright, and a folded cloth damp and cool. Nothing excessive, nothing trying to impress. Just enough to say, you are here, you are human, you can stop. You sit, because your body understands the invitation faster than your mind can overthink it. The mat gives under your weight, softening the stone. You place your hands on your thighs and feel the warmth of the tea drifting upward, meeting the coolness from the channel below. A tiny balance forms around you, warm and cool, fragrant and clean, stillness and flow. You lift the glass carefully. The tea smells herbal and light, with a hint of sweetness that feels like it belongs to plants rather than sugar. When you sip, the warmth spreads down your throat and settles in your chest. It's calming in a practical way, like a blanket that doesn't make you sweat. This tea is neither. It's an act of kindness, slow enough to register. You set the glass down and pick up a piece of fruit. The pomegranate seeds burst with tart sweetness, bright and sharp, then soften into something mellow. Your mouth wakes up. Your senses wake up. And the weird part is, the more your senses wake, the more your thoughts fall asleep, like they finally trust you to handle the moment. Nearby, someone lays a small brass oil lamp on the edge of the platform. The lamp is simple but elegant, metal warmed by use. Its flame is steady, not flickering wildly. It adds a golden pulse to the shade. The light touches the tea glass, the fruit, the woven mat, and makes them look quietly important. Not sacred, exactly, just cared for. A woven reed basket sits beside the lamp, empty now, waiting for whatever the garden decides to shed next. You recognize it from earlier, the same practical container moving through the space like a recurring character who never speaks but always shows up when it's time to gather the day's leftovers. You rest your back against the low wall and listen. Here, the fountain sound is muted, replaced by the gentler whisper of water in the channel. It slides past with a soft, continuous hush, like a sentence that never ends because it never needs to. The vine leaves above you rustle faintly. Somewhere a night bird calls once, then falls silent, as if it even remembers not to be dramatic. You watch the locals move through the resting area with the same quiet competence you saw at the basins. They step carefully around the channel. They place objects down with intention. They keep their voices low or absent entirely, letting the water do the talking. Their hospitality is not intrusive. No one demands your story. No one demands your gratitude. They offer comfort and let you accept it at your own pace. You begin to understand that this kind of welcome is a skill. It requires attention, noticing when someone needs shade, when someone needs warmth, when someone needs to be left alone. It's the opposite of the outside world's constant grabbing for attention. Here, care is subtle, like the way the vine canopy filters light, like the way the mat softens stone, like the way the tea warms your chest without announcing itself. You take the damp cloth and press it lightly to your forehead. The coolness is immediate, a clean relief that makes your eyes want to close. It's not indulgent, it's simply effective. Your nervous system gets the message, you are safe enough to soften. You sit longer, letting the tea empty slowly, letting the fruit's brightness fade into gentle sweetness on your tongue. Your mind drifts, not into frantic thinking, but into that loose, quiet zone where memories float without hooks. You remember small joys, sunlight on a wall, a laugh you didn't expect, a moment you almost missed. You remember worries too, but they feel farther away, as if the garden has put them on the other side of a low wall. The lamp flame steadies and steadies, and you find yourself matching it. Steady breath, steady gaze, steady quiet. In this shaded corner, with warm tea and cool water and soft hospitality, you start to believe that rest is not something you have to earn by suffering. It's something you accept when it's offered, like a glass placed gently within reach. You leave the resting corner reluctantly, the way you leave a soft bed on a cold morning. Slow, bargaining with yourself, pretending you might stay forever if you just sit down again. But the garden keeps calling you forward with its quiet logic. The water moves, you move. The night deepens, you deepen with it. The path leads toward adjoining courtyards that sit like calm rooms connected by open air. You pass a low threshold stone, smooth from countless footsteps, and your body instinctively adjusts, stepping with a little more care. In this place, the smallest transitions matter. A change in paving, a change in light, a change in scent. It's all language, spoken without words. Here, the garden's social rules become visible, not written, but lived. You notice how locals pause at crossings, letting others pass first, without fuss. You see how they keep to the side of channels, never stepping over water unless a bridge is there, as if crossing water casually would be like interrupting someone mid-sentence. You observe small gestures that function like greetings, a slight inclination of the head, a hand briefly to the chest, a soft stillness that acknowledges without demanding. You follow suit because the garden has made you teachable. You don't have to perform respect in some stiff, awkward way. You simply move with gentleness. Your steps quiet, your gaze soft. You stop when someone else stops. You let your own urgency dissolve, because it has no useful job here. A courtyard opens on your left, framed by arches and low walls. Inside, a shallow pool mirrors lantern light like melted gold. The water is still enough that you can see the reflection of a cypress trunk cutting the surface cleanly. A few petals float there, motionless, as if they've chosen to rest rather than drift. You take that as permission. You notice how people occupy space. No one sprawls in the main walkway. No one blocks a channel. They cluster near edges, leaving the center open, honoring the lines of movement the garden provides. It's not rigid, it's considerate. The kind of consideration that feels rare in crowded modern life, where everyone is accidentally elbowing everyone else while swearing they're fine. Near a wall, you see shoes lined up neatly, not a pile, a line. Even in removing something as simple as footwear, there's a quiet order, a respect for shared space. You don't need a sign to tell you what to do. The environment makes the expectation obvious. You recognize that feeling from good design, good systems, when the world gently guides behavior instead of punishing mistakes. You move along a corridor where the scent changes again. Less rose, more warm spice, maybe from a nearby kitchen or a storage room where herbs are kept. It's subtle, carried by night air. Your stomach notices, a small reminder that you are an animal with needs, not a machine with tasks. The garden, unbothered, accommodates that truth. At another threshold, you pause. A caretaker is there, adjusting a small brass lamp set into a niche. The flame is shielded from wind by carved stone, and the light spills outward in a controlled pool. You watch the hands as they trim the wick slightly, lowering the flame to a steadier size. Even light here is curated, bright enough to guide, soft enough to soothe. You continue into a more communal area where the garden brushes against everyday life. A small table sits near a wall with a few cups set neatly on it. A clay pitcher rests beside them. A woven reed basket holds fresh leaves, perhaps mint, perhaps something fragrant. Someone has arranged these things without turning it into a ceremony. The message is simple. Small comforts are normal here. You begin to practice the local courtesies without thinking. You slow down when approaching a cluster of people. You step aside rather than thread through. You keep your hands calm at your sides. You let your eyes glance, not stare. It's strangely relieving to have rules that are gentle. In the outside world, you navigate social spaces by guessing, apologizing, overthinking. Here, the garden's rhythm shows you what to do. The courtyards themselves feel like lessons in boundaries. Low walls define spaces without making them feel trapped. Water channels separate areas without isolating them. The architecture invites you to move through, to pause, to continue, without forcing you into a single path. You think about your own boundaries, how you either build walls too high or leave everything wide open until you're exhausted. The garden's boundaries are balanced. They guide without imprisoning. You come to a small corner where a vine trellis casts lace-like shadows on the ground. Lantern light filters through leaves and creates patterns that shift with the breeze. You stand still and watch the shadows move, slow and delicate. It feels like watching time itself soften. Somewhere nearby, a caretaker gently clinks a cup against a tray. The sound is quiet, but it rings clear in the night air. It reminds you how silence isn't the absence of life, it's the absence of noise. The garden is alive everywhere. Water moving, leaves stirring, lamps glowing, people tending. Yet it never overwhelms you. You step onto a bridge over a narrow channel and look down. Water slides beneath your feet, carrying reflections of lamp flame and sky. For a moment, you feel like you're standing on the line between worlds, above the hidden work of water, beneath the open work of night. And you realize, with a mild amusement that feels like gentleness toward yourself, that you're doing it. You're moving through a place, through a moment, without trying to optimize it, without trying to capture it, without trying to turn it into content or a checklist. You're simply present. In these courtyards, among small courtesies and quiet customs, you let the garden teach you a softer way to exist, one careful step at a time, guided by water, light, and the unspoken agreement that everyone deserves a little peace. You keep following the water because it has become the least dramatic guide you've had in a while. The channel narrows, slips beneath a low stone grate, and the sound changes. No longer a bright whisper in open air, but a muffled murmur, as if the garden has pulled a blanket over its own voice. You slow near a line of circular stone covers set into the paving beside the path. At first, they look like nothing, just tidy discs worn at the edges. Then you feel it, a faint, cool draft rising from the seams. The earth is breathing, and it breathes cold. A caretaker sets a brass oil lamp nearby. Its shell gold flame doesn't turn the moment into theater. It simply softens the shadows so work can happen without strain. In that warm pool of light, you notice small truths. A thin, dark line of moisture running toward the grate. Specks of silt caught at the edge. The subtle sheen where water has recently passed. The garden's water does not begin at the fountain. It arrives. You follow the wall into a corridor that is still beautiful but honest about being functional. The stonework here is older, fitted with quiet precision. Along the base of the wall, a narrow slit runs like a seam, and from it comes that steady, unseen sound, water moving in darkness. This is where the garden's deepest trick reveals itself. It's not the roses, though they do their best. It's not the symmetry, though it calms your mind like a well-made bed. It's the fact that water is here at all, arriving without roaring machines or modern fuss. It comes the old way, by gravity, by planning, by patient engineering that cooperates with the land instead of trying to bully it. You sense the Kanat system even without an explanation. Somewhere beyond these walls, in higher ground, water is gathered from an aquifer or spring. A gently sloping tunnel carries it for long distances under the soil, protected from sun and evaporation. The slope is measured with care, enough for steady flow, not so steep it tears the channel apart, not so flat it stagnates. It's the kind of balance that looks simple only because someone worked very hard for it. Those stone covers beside the path begin to make sense. They are the tops of vertical shafts, openings that allow air, access, and maintenance. Workers can descend to clear silt, repair collapses, and keep the tunnel alive. The garden above stays calm because people below stay committed. The thought lands in you with a quiet weight. Peace has a basement. You imagine the work down there. Cool darkness, cramped space, careful footing on damp stone, hands scraping mud into baskets. Your chest tightens, not from fear, but from respect. You get irritated when your charger cable disappears. Here, whole generations keep a hidden river flowing so the surface can remain green. You pass another cover and notice a faint ring of damp soil around it, like a soft halo. The garden is showing you where its heart beats. The fountains you've been admiring are the smile. The Kanat is the lungs. As you walk, the caretaker's routines click into place. Measuring water levels, clearing grates, sweeping paths. It isn't fussiness, it's stewardship. In a climate where heat can steal moisture in a single afternoon, you don't waste water on chaos. You direct it. You share it. You design beauty that also protects itself. You pause at a distribution point where the channel splits. One narrow ribbon continues straight, another veers toward young trees. The split is clean and intentional, as if the stone itself knows how much each side should receive. You think about how your own energy splits each day, how much goes to work, to worry, to other people, to the endless background task of being available. No wonder you feel dry by evening. Your flow has no careful channeling. It just spills wherever the loudest demand points. Here the water is portioned with quiet fairness. The garden doesn't flood one corner and starve another. It gives enough, then moves on. Even overflow is guided into basins that cool the air, refresh the space, and continue the journey. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is panicked. Near the grate, a woven reed basket appears again, now filled with leaf litter and dark silt pulled from the channel. The basket is humble, but it belongs to the same system as the fountain's beauty. Someone has to carry the unglamorous bits, or the whole miracle clogs. You stand in the lamp's warm glow and feel cool air rise from stone. The garden's calm is engineered, not accidental, built on hidden gradients, careful measurements, and steady hands. The fountains can sing because the connet keeps breathing. And without making a big speech about it, you understand a softer kind of strength, one that doesn't shout, doesn't sprint, doesn't beg to be noticed. It simply keeps flowing, quietly, all the way home. You carry that thought, peace has a basement, back into the garden's softer spaces, and suddenly everything looks even more alive. The fountains feel less like decoration and more like proof that someone, somewhere, did the unromantic work so you could sit here and pretend the world is gentle. Night settles fully now, but it doesn't fall like a curtain. It arrives like a shawl, slow, warm in feeling, even if the air is cool. Lanterns brighten along the paths, their light cupped by carved niches and low stone walls so it spills outward in careful pools instead of glare. The garden under lamplight becomes something different, less symmetrical in the harsh way daylight can expose, more intimate, more forgiving. You walk until the main fountain comes into view again, but now it looks like a small constellation of moving light. Each ripple breaks the lantern glow into trembling lines. Water turns the garden's lighting into a soft performance that never repeats exactly, never asks you to clap. You stop beside a basin and watch reflections flutter on the underside of a cypress branch. The shadows dance slowly, not the jittery kind that makes you uneasy, but the kind that rocks you, like being gently swung. The air is cooler now, and it carries scents differently. Rose becomes a whisper. Leaf becomes a deeper note. Stone becomes almost sweet, the way cool mineral surfaces can smell clean and faintly ancient. You breathe in and feel your lungs expand without strain. Nearby, the brass oil lamp appears again, one of the same kind you saw earlier, a familiar object, like a recurring melody. It sits on a ledge, flame steady, metal catching a quiet shell gold shine. The lamp's warmth does not fight the night, it collaborates with it. You can see your hands in its glow. You can see the edges of the path. You can also see enough shadow to feel safe, because the garden isn't trying to erase darkness, only to soften it. You pass a cluster of locals moving along a side path, their steps even, their posture relaxed. No one seems hurried by the hour. Night here is not the end of usefulness. It's a shift in mood. People do quieter work, adjusting lamps, checking channels, collecting stray leaves. The garden is tended as if it is still listening, still awake in its own way. You drift toward an open area where the sky can be seen more fully. Stars pepper the dark blue above, and the cypress tops slice into it like ink strokes. The reflection of those stars appears in a pool, faint but real, and you find yourself caught between two skies, one overhead, one underfoot. It makes you feel both small and strangely held, like the universe has more patience than your anxious brain likes to admit. The night also changes the garden's sounds. The fountain's splash becomes more pronounced because everything else quiets. The water in the channels murmurs with a slightly lower tone, like it is settled into sleep talk. A distant rustle, someone moving through leaves, or wind shifting a branch, becomes noticeable, but not alarming. The garden's soundscape is curated the way its paths are. Nothing sharp, nothing invasive. You sit again, drawn by the basin's cool rim and the soft light that makes your face feel less tired than it probably is. The stone presses cold into your palms, grounding you. You let your gaze wander across the garden's night contours, low walls that catch lantern glow, rose bushes that become dark rounded shapes, and trellises that throw patterned shadows on the ground. You think about how night usually treats you. In modern life, night becomes a trap for thoughts. The moment you lie down, your brain tries to open every tab it ignored during the day. It replays conversations. It invents disasters. It reminds you of things you cannot fix at midnight and then acts offended when you don't fix them. Here, the night does not provoke. It soothes. It gives you something to focus on that is real and repetitive and harmless. Water moving, light glowing, leaves breathing. And because the garden is not rushing you, you start noticing its older time. The stonework looks like it has seen centuries of evenings. The channels feel like they've carried countless nights across their narrow backs. You imagine people long ago sitting where you sit, leaning their hands on the same cooled rim, listening to the same calm persistence of water. Their worries would have been different names, different dangers. But the nervous system would have been the same. The body would still crave shade, coolness, safety, routine. You feel a soft kinship with those unseen others, not because you're being sentimental, but because it's true. Humans have always needed places like this, places built to protect the mind from its own sharp corners. A caretaker passes at the edge of your vision with the woven reed basket, now carrying trimmed leaves and spent blossoms. The basket's silhouette is familiar, comforting in its repetition. They pause near a channel, lift a leaf from the water, then move on. Small care, constant care, no applause. The garden remains a balance of engineered function and sensory comfort. Night doesn't diminish it, it completes it. The lamps make the water glow. The water makes the lamps feel alive. The shadows make the light gentle. The cool air makes your breath deeper. You sit by the fountain and let the night settle into you. Your eyelids feel heavy, not from exhaustion, but from safety. You're not fighting sleep. You're being invited into it. And for once, you are willing to accept the invitation without arguing. You don't notice it at first because the garden is very good at persuading you that everything is fine. Your body keeps loosening, that slow untying you didn't realize you were capable of. But then the fountain's voice changes, so slightly you almost blame your own ears. The splash that was bright becomes softer, a little flatter. The steady rhythm slips half a beat. You lean forward on the stone rim and listen, and the sound you've been using as a lullaby is suddenly thinner. Not gone, just less sure. You look at the water's surface. The ripples still spread, but their circles feel narrower. The stream that arcs from the spout seems to hesitate before it falls, as if the pressure behind it is thinking twice. It's subtle enough that a distracted person would miss it. Luckily, you're not distracted anymore. You're the kind of person who notices when a room's mood shifts, which is both a gift and an exhausting personality trait. The rim under your fingers is still cool. The air is still sweet with leaf and stone, yet the water's song has changed, and that change rearranges everything else. Without water, the shade would feel stale, and the geometry would feel like a diagram instead of a refuge. A caretaker appears near the channel, moving with quiet speed that is still not frantic. Their posture changes first, no longer drifting but angled toward the sound. Another caretaker joins them, then another, and you watch how the garden's calm responds, not with panic, but with focus. They crouch near a grate where the channel runs beneath stone. One hand hovers over the water as if feeling for a pulse. A small hook dips into the channel to lift a leaf caught at the edge. The leaf comes free and floats onward. The flow improves for a moment, then settles back into that weakened tone. You realize this isn't a single leaf's fault. This is something upstream. Something hidden in the garden's basement, where the Kanat breathes and carries its secret river. When you depend on invisible systems, you learn to respect the smallest warning signs. The caretakers move along the channel, checking intersections where water splits. Lantern light glides over stone like a slow searchlight. They pause at a measuring point and dip a wooden gauge into a basin. The water level sits lower than it should, not dramatically, but enough to make their hands still for a longer beat. A dry wind brushes the leaves, and for the first time tonight it doesn't feel purely pleasant. It feels thirsty. Dust rides on it in a faint veil, and the lantern glow shows tiny motes drifting, ordinary earth, patient and persistent. Nothing collapses into melodrama. The danger is gentler than that, and therefore more real. You walk slowly beside the caretakers, staying out of the way. You notice how they don't speak, yet coordinate through motion. One checks a grate, another checks a split, another adjusts a lamp so the light falls directly on the channel surface. At the main fountain, the arc of water shortens by a finger's width. It's almost insulting how tiny the change is, like the garden is testing whether anyone is paying attention. You are, and so are they. The sound is now a softer patter instead of a confident splash. Reflections hold steadier, not because the night is calmer, but because the water is moving with less force. You hear the same slight weakening in the rills that feed the flower beds, a softer hush where there used to be a confident glide. Even the air feels less cooled, as if the garden is holding its breath. The garden doesn't feel ruined. It still smells sweet. The lanterns still glow. But you feel the shift in your own chest, the subtle return of vigilance, the part of you that listens for trouble, even in beautiful places. You hate that part and also rely on it, which is a very human joke. A caretaker lifts the woven reed basket and begins collecting debris along the channel. Twigs, leaves, a small clump of silt gathered at a corner. Another runs a cloth along the stone lip where water meets path, removing grit that could catch and accumulate. They are doing what they can on the surface because that is what is available right now. You look down the long axis of the garden. Lamps dot the path like quiet stars. The channels run straight and patient, still carrying water, still doing their job. But with a faint hesitation you can now hear everywhere, once you've heard it once. The garden's heartbeat is not stopping, it is faltering. And something in you understands the truth without panic. A garden like this survives not because nothing goes wrong, but because people notice the wrongness early, when it is still subtle, still solvable, still just a thinner song in the water. The wind keeps its dry insistence, not strong enough to topple anything, just constant enough to irritate every leaf. It slides along the garden walls and carries a thin grit that catches in the lantern light, making the air look slightly hazed. You feel it on your lips, that faint, dusty taste that tells you the world outside the walls is still doing what it does, heating, drying, demanding. The garden answers with calm. But calm doesn't mean untouched. Calm means managed. You walk with the caretakers toward the outer edge, where the garden's refined paths begin to feel more like a boundary line. The scent here shifts away from roses and basils into something more bare. Stone warmed by day. Soil that wants water. Leaves holding tight to their own moisture. The lanterns are set farther apart, and shadows grow larger between them, not threatening, just emptier. The fountains behind you continue their weakened patter. The sound follows, like a reminder you can't ignore once you've noticed it. The caretakers move toward a section of wall where the water channel disappears under a low stone overhang. A narrow service path runs alongside it, less polished than the main walkway, but still swept clean. Even their backstage is tidy. You feel the threat now as something wider than a clog. It's the season itself, leaning on the system. A dry wind is not a villain with a face. It's a pressure, an extra load on the garden's hidden infrastructure. Water evaporates faster. Plants draw more. Dust accumulates quicker. The same flow that felt abundant an hour ago now feels like a precious thing being spent. You notice the plants responding, not dramatically, no collapsing flowers or cinematic wilting, but small signs. Leaves curled slightly at the edges, soil that looks a shade lighter, a dry crispness to the air beneath the canopy. The garden is still beautiful. It is also working harder to stay that way. At a junction, the caretakers pause. The wooden gauge dips again into a basin, and you see the same lower mark. One of them turns toward a side channel that feeds a set of younger trees and adjusts a small stone lip. The flow to that channel reduces just a little, redirecting more water toward the main rill that supports the central fountains and cooling pools. You watch the decision and feel the weight of it. This is triage, garden style, not in a cruel sense, more in a clear-eyed sense. When the system is strained, you choose what to protect first: the spine, the circulation, the things that keep the whole place stable. The younger trees will still drink, but less. They will be watched. Their soil will be dampened carefully, perhaps later, perhaps at dawn, when evaporation is lower. Nothing is abandoned, but everything is prioritized. The garden's beauty begins to look different to you, less like luxury, more like strategy. Shade is placement, water is math. Fruit trees are not just pleasant, they are a food source, a living investment. Cypress trees are not just tall drama, they are windbreakers, cool makers, boundary markers. Even the walls are part of the system, sheltering the garden from harsher currents outside. The wind presses again, and you see a few petals lift from a bush and drift away, caught in the air like small pale moths. They tumble, land, and begin to dry. The caretakers with the reed broom will sweep them later, not because dried petals are messy, but because debris can gather in corners, gather in channels, become a blockage. In a water-dependent world, cleanliness is not just aesthetics, it is survival. You move toward the outer service area where stone covers line the ground again, the tops of maintenance shafts. The cold breath rising from them is weaker now, as if the underground flow has slowed. It's not dramatic, but it's enough. The caretakers linger near one cover, lantern held close, and you see a fine line of dried residue along the stone rim where moisture used to cling. A tiny detail, a big implication. You feel a flicker of worry rise in your chest, old habit, quick to appear. Your brain tries to jump to the ending: drought, failure, the garden turning brittle, the fountains going silent. That's what your mind does. It sprints to disaster like it's being paid per mile. But the caretakers don't sprint. They do the next practical thing. They check the grates. They clear silt. They adjust flows. They set lamps so they can see. They move along the channel in a systematic sweep, like a doctor checking pulse points. Their calm is not denial, it is competence. You recognize something in yourself. You have confused calm with helplessness in the past. You thought if you weren't panicking, you weren't taking things seriously. The garden teaches you otherwise. The caretakers are serious without being loud. They are urgent without being chaotic. The wind continues to whisper dust over the walls. The garden continues to answer with water, less than before, but still moving, still present. And you begin to feel the tension in the space shift from unease to determination. The garden is not surrendering, it is adjusting. You glance back toward the central paths where lanterns glow in a calm line. The fountain's weakened song is still audible, but it hasn't stopped. Not yet. The night is deep, the air is dry, and the hidden system is strained. Yet the garden holds, because the people who love it are already at work, making small, careful choices to keep the water alive. You keep to the edge of their movement, close enough to learn, far enough not to trip over competence. The garden's surface still looks composed, lanterns glowing, cypress shadows standing tall, roses pretending they're not even slightly concerned. But the caretakers' bodies tell the truth. Their steps shorten, their attention narrows, their calm becomes a tool sharpened for a specific job. A brass oil lamp is lifted and carried ahead, its small flame cupped from the wind. The light moves like a slow heartbeat through the darker service path, and you follow it without needing to be told. You do notice, however, how your mind tries to narrate this into drama, because your brain is addicted to tension, the way some people are addicted to sugar. The garden refuses to feed that addiction. It offers only practical urgency, the quiet kind that expects your cooperation. You leave the polished axis and step onto stone that feels older underfoot, less decorative, more honest. The sweeping here is still neat, but the edges show their working life. Scuff marks, faint mineral stains, the dull sheen where water has splashed and dried 1,000 times. The air also changes, cooler, more mineral, like you've moved closer to the garden's bones. Along the wall, the channel disappears beneath a low stone lip, and the sound becomes muffled again. Lantern light skims over the wall's texture, revealing tight joins between stones, the kind of fitting that whispers of patient hands and long memory. You walk past another line of circular covers set into the ground. Tonight their seams feel less cold. The breath of the earth has weakened, and your skin reads it before your brain does. The caretakers pause at a narrow doorway built into the wall. It is not grand. It is not carved for admiration. It is a simple, sealed access point. Wood darkened by time, metal fittings dulled, a latch that looks like it has been opened by people who don't waste gestures. The lamp is set near it, so the light falls on the lock and the stone frame. The flame's reflection trembles on the metal, and the whole door looks like it's holding its own breath. A woven reed basket appears at someone's side, already containing clumps of silt and leaf litter pulled from the channels. It isn't glamorous, but it belongs here as much as the roses do. The garden's elegance has always been a partnership between beauty and cleanup. You remember that, and it keeps you calm in the face of the door, because doors like this tend to invite imagination, and your imagination tends to invite chaos. The latch shifts. The door opens just enough to release a thicker coolness, a damp, earthy exhale that smells of stone, groundwater, and deep shade. It is the scent of hidden work, of water traveling where sun can't steal it. The caretakers move through the opening with practiced care, lamp first, feet placed carefully, bodies angled as if the space inside is narrow and the consequences of clumsiness are not romantic. You step closer, stopping at the threshold. You don't need to enter to feel the difference. The temperature drops immediately, as if the garden has a second climate beneath its skin. The muffled water sound is clearer here, less airy, more concentrated, a steady push through stone, like the garden's veins pulsing quietly in the dark. Inside you can see just enough, a short corridor descending, stone steps slick with moisture, walls marked by mineral traces where water has kissed and moved on. The lamp's light crawls across the surfaces, turning dampness into a faint shimmer. The caretaker's shadows stretch and fold against the walls, large and soft-edged, never frantic. Their movements are precise. One checks the floor edge where silt might gather, another leans toward a side opening to listen, another positions the lamp to widen the pool of light. You feel the garden's backstage presence the way you feel the back of a theater. Ropes, pulleys, the unseen mechanisms that make the front look effortless. Up there, you sit by fountains and let your mind unwind. Down here, people keep the fountains from becoming silent stone ornaments. It's humbling, and it's also comforting, because it means the garden isn't relying on luck. Another sealed panel is revealed along the corridor wall, a smaller access hatch where the channel likely passes. The lamp is brought close, the flame steadies, hands examine seams and dampness, reading the stone like a map. You watch how they don't guess wildly. They observe, they test, they follow evidence. Your anxious brain wants them to just fix it, as if complex systems respond to vibes. The garden answers with reality. You fix what you can see, then you move carefully toward what you can't. A faint scraping sound rises, silt being gathered perhaps, or a small obstruction being teased free. The reed basket is lowered and lifted again, its contents growing heavier with the unlovely proof of work. Wet grit, tangled roots, dark leaves pressed into pulp. The basket swings once, controlled, then steadies, as if even carrying debris is done with respect for balance. You stand at the threshold and feel the cool air against your face like a clean cloth. It makes you calmer, even though the situation is tense. The world outside teaches you that tension must be noisy to be real. The garden teaches you that tension can be quiet and still require full attention. It's a different kind of seriousness, one that doesn't shout, because shouting wastes breath. The caretakers retreat a step, repositioning, and you sense they've reached a point where the problem is no longer just on the surface. Whatever is slowing the flow is somewhere along these hidden lines. A thicker patch of silt, a root intrusion, a small collapse, or simply the compounded strain of dry wind and increased demand. The garden's calm above is beginning to depend on what happens in these dim corridors. You look back once toward the lantern-lit paths and the distant, softened patter of the main fountain. The sound is still there, faint but present, like a tired heartbeat that refuses to quit. Then you turn your attention forward again to the doorway's cool breath and the lamp's steady glow, and you realize you are watching the garden do what it was always built to do: survive by being cared for, one careful step into the hidden channels at a time. You linger at the threshold long enough to understand the underground has its own personality. Above, the garden feels like a composed painting, symmetry, scent, lantern glow. Down here, it feels like a living machine that happens to be made of stone and patience. The air is cooler, thicker, damp enough to make your skin feel freshly washed. The lamp's flame steadies in that sheltered space, as if even fire relaxes when wind can't meddle. The caretakers move farther along the corridor, and you follow as far as the doorway allows, careful not to become a human obstacle. The steps descend to a narrow ledge beside the channel, and you can see the water now, thin, constrained, its surface darker than the fountains above. It glides through the tunnel with a low, muffled sound, like the garden is whispering to itself. And the whisper, once heard, is undeniably weaker than it should be. One caretaker holds the brass oil lamp low so the light grazes the water. That low angle reveals everything: tiny eddies where the flow should be smooth, a faint tremble where water squeezes through a tighter space, a soft line of residue marking where the water level has dropped. The lamp turns the tunnel into a place of clues rather than mysteries. You feel your brain itch to call it suspense. It isn't. It's maintenance. and somehow that's more intense, because maintenance doesn't get rescued by plot armor. They reach a section where the channel narrows under a stone arch. The lamplight catches a darker mass clinging to one side, organic, tangled, unmistakably not part of the original design. A root has found its way in. Not a dramatic tree root, not a monster, just a stubborn set of thin strands that have pushed through a seam over time, chasing moisture the way living things do. The root strands have collected silt like a net. Fine grit, leaf pulp, and mineral sludge cling to them, building slowly, day by day, week by week, until, slightly slowed, becomes noticeably strained. You can almost admire how ordinary the failure is. Not an earthquake, not sabotage, just life doing what life does, plus dust doing what dust does, plus humans being human and letting small problems stay small until they aren't. One caretaker leans close, examining the seam in the stone where the root emerges. Another runs a cloth along the channel edge, feeling the thickness of silt like a doctor reading a pulse by touch. The woven reed basket is set down nearby, ready to receive the unglamorous evidence. It waits with the quiet dignity of an object that knows it matters. There's also a second issue, and it's even less romantic. A small side opening along the wall, an access notch, shows a faint scatter of pebbles and debris where it shouldn't. Not much, but enough to tell you something shifted, or a cover wasn't seated properly, or someone hurried during a previous check and left a tiny gap that welcomed dust inside. Human error here doesn't look like a villain twirling a mustache. It looks like one imperfect day in a long chain of days. Up above, you remember the swept paths and orderly tools. Down here, you see why that order matters. A little grit in the wrong place can become a slow choke. A tiny crack can become an invitation for roots. A cover slightly misaligned can change airflow and let debris settle where it will be hard to reach later. The garden's elegance depends on thousands of these small correct choices. The caretakers begin the clearing with the same calm you've seen all night. The lamp is positioned so its glow lights the root mass without blinding anyone. A simple metal hook slides into the water, catches a clump of leaf pulp, lifts it out with careful control. It drips into the basket with a wet, heavy sound that echoes briefly in the tunnel, then fades. The basket absorbs the mess like it was born for this moment. They work in stages. First, remove what comes loose easily, leaves, silt mats, small twigs. Then test the flow again by watching how the water slips past the obstruction. It improves slightly, then hesitates again, as silt continues to cling to the root strands. The root is the stubborn part. The root is the slow thief. One caretaker uses a small blade, not dramatic, just practical, to trim the thinnest strands. Each cut is controlled, minimizing disturbance so silt doesn't surge downstream and clog another section. The lamp makes the water gleam where it swirls, and you notice the swirls widening as the channel clears. The water wants to move. It's been wanting to move this whole time. You find yourself helping in the smallest, safest way, holding the lamp steady when it's handed back toward the doorway's edge, keeping the light aimed at the seam and the root mass so the hands can work cleanly. Your arms stay still, your breath stays quiet. You become part of the system without pretending you're the hero of it. The garden is not interested in your hero fantasies. It wants steady hands and steady light. More debris comes free. The basket grows heavier with dark silt and shredded root strands, and the air smells faintly of wet earth, clean stone, and crushed plant. The caretaker wipes the channel lip again with a cloth, clearing a thin line where silt likes to settle. The movements are repetitive, deliberate, almost meditative. You feel your own mind matching that rhythm. Less panic, more patience. Less story, more task. The flow changes gradually. The water sound grows fuller, not loud, but more confident. The surface stops trembling so anxiously at the narrow point. The lamp's reflection stretches longer on the water because the current has regained some steadiness. You can see it with your eyes and feel it in the tunnel's air, like the underground is breathing a little deeper. The root is not fully gone, not yet. There's still resistance at the seam, still a roughness to the channel's edge, still a hint of lingering silt that will need careful clearing. But the worst of the blockage is finally exposed, and exposed problems can be solved. You hold the lamp steady and listen as the water's whisper strengthens into a clearer murmur, and you realize this is how restoration begins, not with a dramatic moment, but with grit in a basket, roots cut back, and people staying calm enough for the flow to return. You stay with the rhythm of the work, because it has become its own kind of lullaby, repetition with purpose, steady hands choosing patience over panic. The tunnel air feels cooler against your cheeks, and the dampness keeps the lamp flame calm, as if the underground itself is invested in everyone staying steady. The caretakers continue in measured steps. They don't just rip at the roots and hope for the best. They treat the channel like a delicate line of breathing. Too much disturbance can shove loosened silt downstream and create a new clog where you can't easily reach it. So they clear, pause, observe, clear again. That pattern, action, stillness, attention, feels like a quiet lesson for your own life, where you tend to do action, 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 then wonder why everything feels like sand in your teeth. The woven reed basket is now half full, its bottom heavy with wet grit. When it shifts, you hear a soft, sludgy sound, the unglamorous soundtrack of survival. Someone wipes their hands on a cloth and folds it again, as neat as a bedtime ritual, even here in a damp corridor. Order doesn't stop just because it's inconvenient. Order becomes more important when it's inconvenient. You adjust your stance near the doorway so the lamp's light can graze the water at the tight point. At this angle, you can see the channel's lip clearly, a shallow groove where water has polished the stone over years, and a rougher seam where roots have pushed through. The roots are thinner now, trimmed back, but they still hold a few stubborn tendrils like a clenched fist. The caretakers focus on loosening the last thick clump of silt caught around them, scraping gently with the hook, lifting, placing the mess into the basket. In the pauses between movements, you listen. Water is louder now, still quiet compared to the fountain's song, but richer, more continuous. The underground doesn't sound strained anymore. It sounds tired, but functional, like someone who finally stopped holding their breath. You think about how often you do that. Hold your breath through a stressful day, then wonder why your body aches at night. The garden's water is teaching you what you refuse to practice. Flow is easier than clench. A caretaker slides a hand along the channel wall, feeling for any other roughness or narrowing. Their fingertips move like they're reading Braille. They stop at a point where the stone seam meets the water line and press gently, testing stability. There's no dramatic collapse, just a small give, a tiny pocket of loosened silt behind the seam. They work it out slowly, coaxing it into the flow, then catching it with the hook before it travels too far. You notice how they treat each small piece of debris as meaningful. A pebble isn't just a pebble if it wedges at the wrong angle. A leaf isn't just a leaf if it becomes the start of a silt mat. It's the same with your life, you realize, except you've been dismissing your small frictions, messy sleep, constant notifications, meals eaten standing up, until they gather into one big exhaustion. The garden never dismisses small things. The garden survives because it respects them. The lamp's flame reflects on the water in longer, steadier bands now. That reflection is your proof. The water isn't jerking around obstructions anymore. It's gliding. It's returning to its intended pace, the one the slope was designed for. You imagine the tunnel stretching outward through the earth, carrying the steadier current back toward the fountain basins above. You picture the garden beginning to feel its own relief. One caretaker lifts a handful of trimmed root strands out of the channel. They are pale and wet, stringy like stubborn threads. They go into the basket, and the basket receives them without complaint. You have never loved a basket before, but here you are, developing emotional attachment to woven reed because it represents something you wish you had in your own life, a place to put what doesn't belong in your flow. With the channel clearer, the caretakers start a final rinse through, letting the water carry away the finest suspended silt. They watch closely to ensure it doesn't accumulate at the next narrowing. The lamp is moved along the channel line, briefly illuminating a section farther downstream. The water there looks smoother too, the surface calmer, the sound less choked. The system is recovering. You climb back up toward the doorway as they finish the underground check, and the air changes immediately. Warmer, drier, more open. The night outside feels almost loud by comparison, full of leaf rustle and distant fountain patter. The moment you step back into the garden's lamplight, you notice the difference with your ears first. The fountain's voice has strengthened, not fully restored yet, still slightly softer than earlier in the evening, but undeniably healthier. The splash is brighter, the arc is a little higher. The pattern of sound carries farther, filling the garden like a song returning to its chorus after a quiet verse. You feel relief rise in their chest, a clean exhale that surprises you because you didn't realize you were invested. You were. You've been listening to water like it's a heartbeat, and you don't want it to falter again. The caretakers move along the channel above ground now, checking the splits they adjusted earlier. They slowly undo some of the triage, redirecting a little more flow back toward the younger trees. Their choices become gentle again, rather than protective. It's not an instant return to abundance, but it's a return to balance. You stand beside a basin and put your fingers into the cooled water, letting it wash the lingering tunnel damp off your skin. The water feels clean and alive. You watch ripples widen and fade, and you think, this is what resolution looks like when it's real. Not a grand victory, just flow restored, systems checked, small things cleared before they become big again. Your body relaxes in stages like a knot slowly loosening. You feel your shoulders drop. You feel your jaw unclench. You feel your breath deepen. And for once, you let yourself accept that calm is not a fragile thing. It can be repaired. It can be maintained. It can return quietly if you do the work. If you clear the small blockages, cut back the roots of distraction, and give your own life room to flow. The garden doesn't throw a party when the water returns. It doesn't explode into applause, doesn't light fireworks, doesn't demand that you post a triumphant recap to prove the moment happened. It simply resumes being itself, which is somehow the most satisfying outcome. The fountain's sound grows rounder, fuller, the splash regaining its bright edge. You hear it not as noise, but as reassurance, steady, dependable, alive. You walk along the main axis again, and each step feels lighter, as if the ground itself has loosened. The lanterns still glow in their careful pools, and now the light seems to sit more comfortably on the water, no longer fighting that subtle strain you sensed earlier. The channels whisper with a smoother, more confident flow. Even the air feels cooler again, not dramatically, but enough to notice when you breathe through your nose and the inside of your lungs feels clean. You pause at a junction where two channels meet and watch the water merge without hesitation. It's a small thing, but it feels like a soft miracle. Systems cooperating. No backflow, no stutter, just movement continuing as designed. A caretaker dips the wooden gauge into a basin. The water line has climbed, still not at peak, but rising. The caretaker's posture relaxes by a fraction, and you realize you've been reading these tiny shifts all night. You might not know their language, but you recognize relief in the way shoulders settle and hands stop hovering at the edge of urgency. The woven reed basket, now heavier with its wet evidence, passes by again, carried toward a service corner where debris can be disposed of properly. It swings gently with each step, and you feel an odd gratitude for its silent role in keeping the garden beautiful. The brass oil lamp remains a familiar warm presence too, flame steady, metal catching a soft shell gold glow. These objects have become comforting repetitions, like a bedtime routine you didn't know you needed. Water, lamp, basket, hands, flow. You walk toward the main fountain and sit where you sat at the beginning of the night, on the cool stone rim that has held countless tired bodies. The water's arc is higher now, and the sound has that clear, bright patter that feels like the garden is breathing normally again. Ripples widen across the basin, carrying lantern reflections in trembling lines that stretch and fade, stretch and fade. You could watch it forever. The patterns never quite repeat, but they also never surprise you in a harsh way. Its variety held inside safety. The dry wind still exists. It hasn't been defeated because the world doesn't work that way, but it feels less threatening now because you've seen how the garden responds. Dust still drift beyond the walls, but inside the channels keep moving. The garden doesn't rely on perfect conditions. It relies on maintenance, attention, and the willingness to address problems while they're still small enough to solve. You notice the plants again. Leaves look a touch less curled. The air around the basins feels cooler. The rose scent returns to a slightly fuller whisper, carried on the dampness rising from water. Even the shadows under the cypress trees feel softer, as if the night itself has relaxed. The caretakers make a final circuit. They check grates. They clear corners where silt likes to collect. They adjust the stone lips that direct water to different beds, undoing the strict triage and returning the flow distribution to its normal generosity. It's a careful return, not a reckless one. They don't overcorrect. They don't flood in celebration. They restore balance like people who know the difference between relief and waste. You sit and feel your own nervous system imitate the garden's behavior. Earlier, when the water faltered, you felt vigilance rise. Now, with the flow steadier, you feel that vigilance loosen. The lesson lands gently. Your body is a system too. It has channels: sleep, food, movement, silence. When those channels clog, you falter. When you clear them, you return. Not to perfection, but to function, to breath, to steadiness. You dip your fingers into the basin again, then lift them and watch droplets fall back into the water, each one making a tiny ring that widens, touches other rings, and disappears. You think about how small actions ripple outward: clearing a leaf from a channel, trimming a root strand, sweeping a path. Tiny things that change the whole atmosphere without anyone needing to announce, "I am saving the garden." You look up at the cypress silhouettes against the star-dotted sky. The stars feel brighter now, perhaps because your mind is quieter. The garden's lamplight glows steady, and the fountain song holds its rhythm. Everything is doing what it should. And in that steadiness, you feel something deeply comforting. Restoration doesn't always look like a grand return to how things were. Sometimes it looks like a system learning, adjusting, becoming slightly wiser. The garden has been reminded where it is vulnerable. The caretakers have gathered proof in a basket and knowledge in their hands. Tomorrow, they will likely check that seam earlier. They will likely clean that junction more thoroughly. They will likely prevent the falter from happening in the first place. You let that thought settle into you like warm tea. You don't need to be perfect to be peaceful. You need to be maintained. You need small clearings, small cutbacks, small acts of care that keep your flow alive. The fountain keeps singing, the water keeps moving, and your eyes grow heavy again, not from tension now, but from the quiet satisfaction of watching a living place return to balance. You stay by the fountain long enough that the garden begins to feel less like somewhere you've visited and more like somewhere your body recognizes. The stone rim is cool and steady beneath you. The water song is back in its full, round tone. Not loud, but confident. The kind of sound that tells your nervous system it can stop scanning for danger and start doing that rare thing it pretends it can't do, resting. Eventually, you rise, because the night is moving and the garden has its own gentle closure. Lantern light has shifted, shadows have stretched. The air is cooler now, and the rose scent is faint, a soft ghost instead of a perfume. You follow the main axis one last time, your footsteps slower than before, as if you're trying not to disturb anything, including your own calm. The caretakers are still present, but their urgency has softened into routine again. You see the reed broom sweep a path with unhurried strokes. You see a cloth wipe a stone lip where water beads. You see a brass oil lamp being lowered into a niche, flame adjusted to a quieter height. There is a comforting normality to these gestures, like watching someone tidy a room before sleep. You pass the resting corner where you drank tea. The platform is still there, mats neatly placed, the ledge clean. A faint warmth lingers in the air, as if the tea steam has soaked into the stones. You think about how hospitality here isn't about entertaining, it's about restoring, about making the body feel safe enough to soften. In the courtyards, you notice the social choreography again. Small courtesies, quiet thresholds, The way people move around water as if it is a living line that deserves respect. You find yourself mirroring those habits without effort. You keep to the edge of paths. You pause at crossings. You step over channels only at bridges. It feels natural now, and you realize what a gift that is, learning a new way to move through a space without it feeling like work. The garden gives you one last view that feels like a careful parting gift. A long stretch of channel catching lantern light, the water turning it into trembling gold. The cypress trees stand like tall guardians, their dark forms steady against the sky. The stars above are quiet and persistent, scattered like grains of salt across deep blue. You slow near the entrance where the garden's boundary begins to feel more obvious. The air outside is still drier, still dustier. Even through the wall you sense the world's heat, waiting like an impatient person tapping their foot. The garden has protected you from it for a while. Now it prepares to let you go back. You pause at the threshold stone, the worn, smooth line where so many others have entered and left. Your hand touches the wall briefly, cool stone under your palm, and you feel that familiar grounding contact again. It reminds you that places hold memory. They hold the shape of countless evenings, countless breaths, countless quiet repairs. A caretaker passes with the woven reed basket, now empty again, as if the garden has already absorbed the work and moved on. The basket's emptiness feels symbolic in a way that doesn't make you roll your eyes, because it's practical. Debris cleared, flow restored, basket ready for tomorrow. That is the rhythm. Things collect, things clog, things are cleared, and life continues. You take one last look back toward the central fountain. You can't see it clearly from here, but you can hear it. That steady patter, the sound of water falling into itself and becoming calm again. It's astonishing how quickly you can grow attached to a sound when it becomes your anchor. You realize you've been using it like a metronome for your breath, a reminder that time can pass without you wrestling it. You step closer to the gate and feel the outside air brush your face, slightly warmer, slightly rougher. The contrast makes you appreciate what the garden gave you: coolness, structure, gentleness, a sense of being guided without being controlled. You carry that out with you, even if you don't call it a lesson. It's more like a small shift in how your body believes the world can be. You remember the caretaker's hands trimming roots with calm precision. You remember the lamp's steady flame in the tunnel. You remember the basket receiving the mess without complaint. You remember how the garden did not panic when the water faltered, how it responded with focus and care. As you step fully beyond the threshold, you feel a brief tenderness, an almost touching farewell that doesn't need words. You don't wave dramatically, you don't promise grand returns. You simply leave with a quieter chest and a softer gaze, as if the garden has lent you its steadiness for the road ahead. And the fountain keeps singing behind you, fading into distance, not as something lost, but as something you can remember and carry. Cool water, warm light, steady flow. You turn back once, because you can feel it in your bones. You are not leaving on a technicality, you are leaving on a feeling. The world outside the wall is still there, warm and impatient, but the garden behind you is still breathing, water moving, lamps glowing, cypress shadows holding their tall, quiet posts. So you step back through the threshold as if you forgot something important, and in a way, you did. You follow the sound like a thread. The main fountain greets you with its restored, steady patter, and the relief in that sound is almost embarrassing. It's just water, you tell yourself, and your nervous system rolls its eyes and replies, yes, it's just water, the same way it's just air, and just sleep, and just peace, until you don't have it. You sit on the familiar stone rim again. The basin reflects lantern light in broken gold, and the ripples keep combing it into softer shapes. The night has cooled further. Your skin reads it instantly, like your body keeps a private weather report. The stone chills your palms in a way that feels clean, and you let your hands rest there without fidgeting, as if you are learning how to be held. Across the path, a brass oil lamp burns in its niche, flame-trimmed low and steady. Its shell gold glow doesn't fight the darkness, it makes the darkness gentler. Nearby, someone has set the woven reed basket down, empty now, innocent again, waiting for tomorrow's small messes. You look at it and almost laugh, not because anything is funny, but because it's so honest. Even paradise has debris, even beauty sheds. The difference is that here, the shedding is expected, collected, carried away, and the place keeps breathing anyway. You listen harder, because listening is the only task left. You hear the fountain splash, the channel murmur, the occasional leaf shifting in the breeze. You hear the hush of distant steps, caretakers completing their final checks, easing the garden toward sleep the way you might tuck in a child, smoothing a blanket edge, lowering a lamp, making sure the door is latched. The garden is not abandoned to the night, it is entrusted to it. Your mind tries one last time to do its favorite trick: inventory. What didn't you finish? Who did you disappoint? What will tomorrow demand? The questions show up with their little clipboards, ready to start another shift. And you do something quietly rebellious. You do not answer them. You let them stand there, awkward and unemployed, while you watch a ring of ripples widen and dissolve into the basin's edge. You remember the thinness in the water's song, the way your chest tightened before you even understood why. You remember the service path, the practical doorway, the cool breath of the underground. You remember hands trimming roots, lifting silt, working slowly enough to avoid creating a new problem while solving the old one. You remember that the garden's calm didn't come from pretending, it came from noticing and maintaining, from respect for small things. And you begin to translate that respect into your own language, the one your body understands. You picture your day as a channel. You picture the silt, small irritations, constant scrolling, too many yeses, too few pauses, settling quietly until the flow narrows. You picture the roots, habits that creep in because they're thirsty for your attention, because they love moisture and darkness and repetition. You picture the simple tools, a boundary, a routine, a single quiet hour, a glass of water, a walk without your phone. The fountain keeps offering the same lesson without preaching it. Water rises, water falls, water continues. It does not cling to the last splash. It does not panic about the next one. It just arrives, does what it is meant to do, and moves on. You lean back slightly, letting the night hold you. The cypress trees stand like tall commas around the garden's sentences, reminding everything to pause. The stars above feel close, not because they moved, but because your mind stopped running away from them. The air is cool enough to make your breathing slow. Your eyelids grow heavier, And you don't fight them with a final scroll or a final thought experiment. You let your body accept what it has been asking for all day. You stay by the cooling fountains in this Persian garden until the water's sound becomes less like something you listen to and more like something you float on. Your thoughts thin, soften, and drift downstream. The lamp's glow blurs at the edges. The stone under your hands remains steady, and in that steady flow, you let yourself fall into the simplest ending of all, a quiet, natural sleep. The garden doesn't vanish when you close your eyes. It simply grows softer, as if it understands you are tired and decides to speak in whispers. The fountain's patter stretches out into a long, smooth hush, and each sound feels farther apart like footsteps fading down a corridor that is safe and familiar. You don't need to follow them. You can stay exactly where you are, warm behind your ribs, cool at your fingertips, held by shade and water and the gentle discipline of a place that knows how to last. If your mind tries to wander back to bright screens and sharp worries, you let it wander, and you let it return. No punishment, no lecture, just the quiet practice of coming back to the basin, to the ripples, to the lamp's steady glow. You breathe in the faint rosewater air. You breathe out whatever you carried in, dust, tension, unfinished sentences. The cypress trees stand watch, not as guards, but as reassurance, tall, patient shapes that have seen countless nights and never once demanded you be perfect. Somewhere beneath the paths, the hidden water continues its journey through the earth, cool and protected, moving by simple gravity and long planning. You don't have to manage it. You don't have to fix anything right now. Tonight the work is done. Tonight you are allowed to be the quiet surface, not the busy hands. Your shoulders loosen, your jaw unclenches, your forehead smooths. The last lantern light turns to a soft blur behind your eyelids, like a warm ember sinking into ash. The fountain keeps breathing for you, steady and sure, and you drift with it, downstream, deeper, calmer, very gently, until even the idea of effort feels far away, and sleep arrives like cool water, like shade, like home. End of story. Sweet dreams.